Very exciting time for us, and people are always asking, like, you know, whether you've reflected, have you taken some time to, based on the season? And no, I've unfortunately for myself, you know, kind of can't wait till this opportunity gets back to us. And so it's a really exciting time, not in all that's happened, but for our program starting spring ball on Saturday, but also with all the things that are going on with our guys. You know, the combine starts up today. We've got 8 guys over there that will be performing at the combine. Truly kind of made me believe and think there could have been a couple others, but I think the 24th then we'll have them all here to do their pro day as well. So it's a big step right now for us starting up spring ball. It's also a big step for our former guys and their opportunity to take this next step in their journey beyond here. So a lot of great things. Spring ball for us in particular. This is probably in my 5 years, this will be the 6th spring ball, and I think this is the most important spring ball. And everybody said, well, what do you mean? Like, year 1 was really important, just trying to get to know the kids and a lot of different things that you're trying to implement and start a culture and build upon things and you know, a whirlwind. But I think for us in the program, this will be as big a spring ball and as big of next 4 or 5 weeks as we've had. And I just mean that in the sense that where we are as a program, what we need to do to continue to move forward, and most importantly with the guys we've got to move forward with. So it's really unique. We've got some older guys that are back and have played a lot of football, but I think, you know, with the guys that we've lost, it's not like we're going to have any expectations of taking steps backward, but every year the differences are, you know, hey, how does the team work? How does it mesh together? What are the unique things about it? This year in particular with a lot of really high-end guys, and I mean obviously the Desmond Ritters and the Kobe Bryants and the Majay Sanders and those guys that have been around here for so long that were unique in the sense that they had played a lot of ball, but they were the most competitive guys, and they were, you know, even in the spring sometimes you could say, well, you've got an older team last year, so your spring sometimes is a little bit different, but those guys were so unique that they were, you know, they're constantly wanting to get better and pushing to get better, and even if we tried to hold them out in the spring, they wouldn't. And so, like I said, we've got some really good players come back. We've got some really good guys that maybe you don't know as much about just yet, but how that all meshes together, the leadership, to me, is what's so critical about this spring. And our ability to go out there and have that healthy competition amongst each other, but find ways for us to grow together. So things that we didn't have to worry about. We were throwing and catching and tackling last spring. This year, yes, we're still throwing and catching and tackling, but the uniqueness is how does the leadership, how does the replacement of not just players but the play hard guys, how does that all mesh together to make you a better football team? Because that's our objective. Our objective is to be a better football team and to grow the program. And it doesn't always mean you maybe have a better player stepping in for Ahmad Gardner, but you've got a better opportunity for a guy that things are going to work different and mesh together a little bit different. So exciting, probably the most exciting time for our coach. Yes, it can be nerve-wracking, but you know, this was some new, really, really hungry guys that are going to be rolling out there on Saturday, and you know, a new start that I think for us as coaches, it's a really exciting time.
Has there been a different buzz maybe in the weight room and meetings with some of these younger guys that maybe have been blocked for a year or two that feel like they have a chance now?
I do think. I mean, I think that you know, it's different when you walk onto the football field, and we've been doing some walkthrough stuff, and started the last 2 weeks into some more football, and you see the youth of things there. You might see a little bit greater buzz and energy sometimes in the weight room because, you know, those young guys, that's, you know, a spot where it's not completely new to them, and then Saturday becomes a whole different buzz, and it'll be interesting to walk in here on Saturday for me and to look at that team in the face, and that's really the start of the new beginning. And I couldn't tell you what it's exactly going to be like because every year is different. You know, and when you walk in that back of that room, for me, I'll be evaluating just what it feels like, what it looks like, what those guys in the front row, how they sit, just, you know, in your mind of what's this team going to, you know, hold its identity around, and how are they going to do it. So I'd like to tell you, yes, there's been a buzz. It's, you know, coming off of a loss is always difficult in the off season, but I think that, you know, the way we went about and the way that all went out, I think there was still a lot of positive momentum and even a little bit more of a hunger based on things didn't finish the right way.
Does this feel like a new chapter, or does it feel like a new book? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I think it is a new book. And if you want to call it Life Without Desmond Ritter, I don't know how you want to title it. There's not just Desmond Ritter gone, obviously Ahmad and Kobe, and I mean, there's a lot of guys that are gone, but I think that sometimes you're just talking about that face. And the quarterback position is always the most unique position. And if not a great quarterback, the thing that a quarterback in general does, it gives everybody a lot of confidence. And so not that we don't believe we've got every bit as good a quarterback in a quarterback battle, but I just think that the start in some ways is like a new book. And do we want to change as a coach? No, we're still going to be who we are, but things change, and that identity will be a little bit different. Not that we're not still going to have the same and want to be the same identity that we are, but even last year going in, hey, we got to throw the ball a little bit different. We got to give Desmond some different opportunities and some different things. We have ideas of what we are, but what we are going to be, or what these guys in these seats can do and do well. And our job as a coach is obviously to coach it, but also to figure out what that is and continue to kind of mold ourselves towards that.
You talk about finding that identity. Is that at the top of your checklist this spring of these next few weeks? Is finding that identity for this team?
It's a big part of it, and I can't come in here on Saturday and tell them the number one thing is to find an identity, because they know what our identity has been, but how that really from within your program can shift and adjust is something that the coaches have got to find and see, and how those guys gel together, how that competitive, that healthy competition works together. Is so much of the identity, and the identity might not be seen as much on Saturday. What different are they? They threw the ball 52% of the time. They ran the ball for you. That hopefully they're just very similar to what they are, but the identity within that locker room, meaning how those guys work together, how they mesh together, what the leadership looks like within that locker room, within these seats, is what identity I'm really talking about.
Is leadership the one thing, Luke, that you look for at this point of the season to start building?
Well, we lost some great leaders. We've got some really, really great leaders coming back. I think the number one thing we're looking for, and I could say we lost more than anything, is what we can hold as the highest level of guys within our program. We call it the play hard guys. And I'm not saying they were the guys that went out there on the coin toss for the captains at times, and maybe what you would say is the leaders. But if there were 18 guys on that play hard wall, I think 12 of them came down. And it might be as Desmond Ritter was on that board and he came down. Everybody knows that. But there's guys like Ryan Royer and some guys that maybe people don't know as much about that really were a big part of what it is that we do, and how that leadership amongst that team goes. And so yes, we call it leadership. I call it within these walls here the play hard guys that set the example to how we do everything.
How do you go about finding those guys, knowing which guy needs to be more of a vocal leader, which guy hey, you need to be on this play hard board, even if you're not talking as much in the locker room or anything like that?
We tell all of them they need to be on that play hard board. So if a quarterback can make the play hard board, anybody can make the play hard board, right? It was a little bit easier back in the day to watch Jim Kelly make the play hard board because he's in there blocking and knocking people around. And when you throw the ball a little bit more, sometimes it's a little harder to see those wideouts out there make the putt, but they can. And I think the idea is, what is that really? Is that leadership? Yeah. Is that really playing hard? Yeah. But what it is, it's a consistency. It's about the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Those guys that have that innate ability, that whatever they're asked to do, they do it 100 miles an hour as hard as they possibly can, and make no excuses. And I used to tell them, guys, that you guys are at practice. I used to say, Majay, have you ever had a bad practice? And his answer needed to be, no, I've never had a bad practice. When if you've been at practice, we've had some bad practices with Majay, right? No disrespect, but love him to death. But there's been a few, but never a bad practice in my eyes, meaning he's never once taken a rep off. He's never let up. He just goes. And that's the example of the leadership that we're talking about, and the leadership of what we want. And some guys would say, I don't have as much opportunity to demonstrate that. Well, in the spring, everybody's got an opportunity. Everybody's going to get reps. Well, I'm a wideout. I'm not in the mix every single time. No, there's opportunities. We see and we evaluate everything. And that's where I think that the step for this team has got to really kind of grow here in spring.
you've had leadership groups before in the past few years. Do you have that yet this season? Will you have that?
We'll have it.
Yeah.
We'll have it, but I don't like to anoint those things. I mean, last year we walked into the season and in some ways said, hey, Desmond Ritter and Kobe Bryant are our captains, and we'll get some other captains. I'm not sure we, are going to say that right now. And so really what we want to do is be able to see what we see through this entire spring. And guys like Will Hubert, not like we have to anoint him, it won't take long for them to realize that, oh, okay, he's no different than he was last year. You just might see him out there a little bit more. He's still on the play hard board, and he will be. And so I think that all those things are what as a coach, me in particular, I want to be able to see, and how all those things kind of mesh and work together.
I'm sure you're worried about quarterback. Not worried, but interested in watching and seeing it develop. As a defensive coach, are you maybe even more eyes wide open at corner because you lost multiple of those guys?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you just mentioned the two spots that are what everybody would ask about and be curious about. If you're going to be any bit as good as you were last year or even the year before, those are the two spots where you say, okay, now how do you replace that? And I don't just mean the production. How do you replace the leadership in those spots as well? And so yes, those are two spots. I feel like we've got some really good competitions in, and I think that's where, as a coach, we got to do what our kids do well. And if that means corners defensively, can you play exactly the same way you played the last 3 years without a mod in the boundary? I don't know, but I tell you what, we've got an opportunity to do it. Now, as coaches, we've got to figure out what's going to be best for the guys we got now. And the same thing at the quarterback position. As we compete and battle, as we get further along, we've got to be able to do what those guys do really well. And what Des did well in year 1 and 2 was completely different than what he did well in year 4. And so I think that's where that new little book is starting to be written, is to say, okay, now great coaches and great coaching staffs have got to figure out what the guys that they've got do really well and then put them in those positions. And that's why it's even a greater challenge for us.
How will you keep yourself from getting upset when somebody completes an 8-yard pass to the boundary? You haven't seen that.
I don't get upset. Do I?
I've seen you maybe a little.
I don't know. Somebody will have to keep me a little bit calmer than maybe they had to in the past. But I think we got Coach Combs to be more upset now. They catch an 8-yard pass into the flat to the boundary. So I'll let him get upset to start with. I think that's a part of it's not just the leadership of the kids that sit in those seats to grow. It's the leadership of the guys that stand up front as well. And if we think it's going to be exactly the same, then we're not very good leaders. And if we don't realize as coaches that we will have to adapt, and we're not going to change our standards, but that we have to be able to adapt and adjust and put guys in positions where they can do what they can do really well. Because that's the standard, is ultimately doing what you do really well. And if that means that somebody into the boundary is a little bit different, then maybe we got to play a little bit different. That means that the quarterback that we've got under center is a little bit different than what Desmond Ritter's been the last 4 years, then we got to do things a little bit different. Our expectations aren't going to change, our standards aren't going to change, but the way you go about them, if you're any good, you're going to adjust, adapt a little bit.
It may be too early to ask this question, but
But you're going to anyway?
yeah, well, you might be able to provide some insight. Like, Arquan is obviously a great corner and has great skill and experience. Have you given thought into maybe moving him out into the boundary and instead of keeping him at nickel, or will he stay in that spot?
Well, I think the thing you'll see if you come out, what Coach Combs has already started to do in just our meetings and walkthroughs is those guys are interchangeable. And so by nature, we have played with a nickel back who's been a corner